Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and drift back. Back into a time when the world still believed that Rome could never fall. Short pause. For centuries, it had ruled the West, an empire of stone, law, and order. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, Rome was the center of the world. Its streets were paved in marble, its armies unmatched, its gods many, and its pride endless. But pride has a way of hiding cracks, and by the year 410 AD, those cracks were beginning to spread. Let your body rest, let your thoughts soften. You're safe here, and the story will carry you. Rome had not seen war on its doorstep in 800 years, not since Hannibal, not since the Republic. But now, a new name was whispered in the streets: Alaric. He was no emperor, no senator, no citizen of Rome. He was a Visigoth, a barbarian, they said, but not like the stories. He had once fought for Rome, served in its armies, learned its ways. And yet, Rome had betrayed him, denied him, refused to give his people a home. So now, he waited at the gates. Call to action, soft and nurturing. If you enjoy falling asleep to the whispers of history, follow history for sleep. A new story awaits you each night, and you are always welcome here. Inside the city, fear bloomed. The Senate, once proud, now argued in whispers. The people, once powerful, watched the skies. Would the gods protect them? Would their walls be enough? Would Rome endure? Pause. Let the silence speak. Outside, Alaric did not attack. He surrounded. He waited. He watched. The first siege came, like a shadow. Grain stopped flowing. Merchants vanished. The Tiber grew still, and inside, hunger spread. Bread lines grew long. Coins became useless. People bartered rings for a handful of barley. But the emperor, Honorius, was far away, safe in Ravenna, behind swamps and guards. He sent no help, no food, only silence. Soft breath, slow rhythm. Rome was alone. Still, the city endured. Priests prayed, senators plotted, soldiers stood tall at the gates. But Alaric was patient. He did not want to burn the city. He wanted respect, recognition, land for his people. So he offered peace, gold for withdrawal, honor in exchange for safety, and Rome paid. The Visigoths left. For a moment, Rome breathed again. Church bells rang. Children laughed. The market reopened. But the cracks had deepened. Then, Rome betrayed Alaric again. Pause. A breath of regret. A new advisor poisoned the emperor's mind, told him to break the deal, to deny the Goths again, to humiliate Alaric. And so, when Alaric came once more, he came not with offers, not with diplomacy, but with purpose. Call to action, gentle and warm. Let your mind drift now, as Rome drifts toward her night. If this story soothes you, follow our whispers. There are many more still waiting, in the quiet of history. This time, there would be no second deal. No gold, no lies. Rome would be tested, and the world would never be the same. As darkness settled over the empire, and torches burned outside the walls, even the bravest Romans began to dream of surrender. Not because they were weak, but because they were tired. Tired of watching their gods go silent. Tired of waiting for help that never came. Tired of believing they were still invincible. And so, in the stillness of a Roman night, a gate was opened. Close softly, whisper tone. In the next part, we will follow Alaric through that gate and walk beside him as he enters the eternal city. Sleep now if you can, and let the ruins of Rome carry you into dreams. The gate creaked open, just slightly. Enough for a man, enough for a shadow, enough for a ghost. No trumpet sounded, no alarm rang, only the wind and the soft pad of boots on stone. The Visigoths were inside, and Rome was no longer sealed. Let your body settle. Let your breathing slow. You're here now, floating through the echoes of time, safe and still. The city did not scream, not at first. No flames, no thunder, just the quiet realization that the walls had failed, that the eternal city was mortal after all. In the dark, they moved like water, down the streets, past marble statues, past arches carved with old victories, past temples, long silent. Some looted, some prayed, some wept. The people fled to the churches. Basilicas stood as islands of hope. St. Peter's, St. Paul's, sanctuaries beneath the cross, and Alaric honored them. He had given the order, no blood in God's house, and the order was obeyed. Call to action, soft and gentle. If you feel the story sinking into your dreams, follow history for sleep. Let each episode be a lantern in the night. We're here to guide you, gently through the shadows of the past. But outside those sacred walls, Rome was no longer Roman. Palaces were stripped, gold was taken, silk torn from noble beds. The Forum echoed with unfamiliar footsteps. And yet, the city still stood. Alaric had not come to destroy. He had come to claim what was denied: respect, dignity, a future for his people. The emperor did not come. Honorius remained in Ravenna, watching, waiting, afraid. He sent no army, no messengers, no comfort. Rome was abandoned. The sack lasted 3 days, 3 long days of silence and sorrow. And then, the Visigoths left. They took their spoils, took their hunger, took their memory, and vanished into the countryside. Soft pause, reflective tone. The Citiata was not burned. Its walls still stood, its monuments unbroken. But something invisible had cracked. Something ancient. Something proud. Rome was no longer the center. It was no longer eternal. And the world knew it. Kings in distant lands heard the news and whispered, "If Rome can fall, so can we all." Call to action, dreamy and inviting. If you're still with us, if your mind is still wandering the quiet streets of Rome, follow history for sleep. Let us be your candle in the dark, and together we'll walk through time, one step, one breath, at a time. After the sack, Alaric did not celebrate. He did not crown himself. He did not burn what he could have. Instead, he looked south, toward Africa, toward grain, toward survival. He led his people forward, searching for a place they could call home. But storms came, ships sank, and the dream slipped further away. In the quiet that followed, Rome began to mourn, not just for its losses, but for its illusion. The illusion of being untouchable, unshakable, chosen. It was now just another city, wounded, weakened, human. Breathe in slowly, then let it go. Even in ruin, Rome whispered. Its stones remembered, its people endured, but they would never again be the same. Soft closing, whisper tone. In the next part, we follow Alaric on his final journey, to the mountains, to the rivers, and to the strange and secret place where his story ends forever. Let sleep find you now. We'll be here when the dream continues. The winds whispered through the silent streets of Rome. The echoes of footsteps were fading now, like the last breath of an old story. Alaric had come and gone, and yet the city remained. But for how long? Rome was no longer the proud, invincible empire it once was. The gods had fallen silent. and the great walls could no longer shield the hearts of its people. Inside, the senators sat in their grand chambers, pondering their fate. Outside, the Visigoths had gone, but their shadow still lingered in every corner, every whisper. Alaric had asked for peace, for a seat at the table, not to destroy, but to be heard. But Rome had rejected him. And so, the gates that once stood proudly as symbols of strength had now been opened, not by the will of the empire, but by the patience of a barbarian king. As the days passed, the city began to recover in its own quiet way. But the cracks in Rome were not just in its walls, they were in the hearts of its people. And somewhere, deep within the ruins, a new idea began to grow. An idea that Rome's glory was not in its power, but in its resilience. That even the greatest empires could fall, but what mattered most was how they rose again. Slowly, the people returned to their lives. The marketplace, once barren, began to hum again with activity. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, and though the city had changed, a quiet strength remained. But there was no denying the truth now. Rome had been humbled. It was not invincible, not eternal, but it would endure. For there were still those who believed, still those who dreamed of a future where the great walls of Rome would rise once more. And in the silence of the night, under the stars, the city whispered its secrets to the wind. Soft pause, allowing the thoughts to settle, gently. If your mind is wandering, let it drift into the quiet of the ruins. Feel the weight of time passing, and let the whispers of Rome guide you toward rest. If you enjoy these stories from the past, follow history for sleep. Each night will bring you closer to a world of wonder and quiet history. For now, let the night embrace you, and let Rome's story carry you softly into dreams. The nights grew darker. In the ruins of Rome, where once the echoes of laughter and power filled the air, now only silence remained. But beneath that silence, something stirred. Something hidden. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath. The stones, the streets, the broken arches, all whispered stories of old. Secrets of what had been lost and what might still be found. For Alaric, the Visigoth king, had not come just to sack the city. No, he had come to claim what had been promised, but never delivered. He had come to lay the foundation for something that would rise from Rome's ashes. But what? What was it that had eluded Rome for so long? What had made the great empire so fragile, so vulnerable despite its might? The truth, my friend, is simpler than you might think. Rome's power had not come from its armies or its gods. It had come from its heart. The heart of the empire was not in the marble columns or the gilded temples. It was in the minds of its people, the philosophers, the thinkers, the architects, the poets. They built Rome not just with stone, but with ideas. And when those ideas began to falter, so too did the empire. The cracks that Alaric had seen were not just in the walls of the city. They were in the very fabric of Rome itself. As Rome struggled to heal, its people began to question everything they had ever known. The Senate, once proud, now spoke in hushed tones. The gods, once revered, seemed to look away. And somewhere in the shadows, a new power was beginning to rise. A power that had not been seen before in the streets of Rome. This power was not a king or a soldier. It was a movement, a quiet rebellion. A voice that asked, what if the fall of Rome was not the end but the beginning? Breathe deeply. Let the quiet seep in. The Visigoths had left. They had taken their gold, their spoils, their victory. But they had not taken Rome's soul. Rome, in its brokenness, still had something that no invader could steal. The hope of what could be. The belief that something new could be built from the ruins. And as the nights passed, that hope began to grow. People returned to the streets. The forums, though silent, began to stir with the murmurs of a new age. And though the gods had not answered their prayers, there were still those who believed they had not been abandoned. Perhaps, just perhaps, the true power of Rome was not in what it had built, but in what it could rebuild. Pause. Let that thought settle. If you feel the whispers of this new age stirring within you, let them guide you deeper into rest. This story has many more layers to uncover, and with each layer, we uncover a new mystery. For in the stillness of the night, amid the ruins, something powerful was taking root. But what it would become, no one could yet know. It was only the beginning. Soft pause. Reflective tone. Let your thoughts wander through the streets of this ancient city. Feel the quiet anticipation as the foundation for a new Rome begins to form. If you're still here, still with us, follow history for sleep. Let us be your guide through the dark corners of history as we uncover secrets and stories waiting to be told. In the next part, we will follow the twists of fate that Rome could not escape, and we will see just how far the cracks in the empire reached. As the sun began to set on Rome's fractured streets, something shifted in the air. The city had never been the same since Alaric's sack. Though the ruins were still standing, the empire's heartbeat had grown faint. The gods who once watched over the eternal city now seemed to ignore its plight. The Senate had fractured, its members arguing over what Rome had become, not what it had been. And the people, those who remained, could feel it deep in their bones. The empire had always been built on the strength of its walls, its legions, its gods, and its philosophers. But now, as the city hummed with the quiet of uncertainty, a new question lingered in the air. Could Rome ever rise again? The fall of the city wasn't just a physical destruction. It was a crisis of identity. Rome had been the beacon of civilization, a testament to human achievement. Its streets had been filled with scholars, soldiers, and emperors who believed in the greatness of their city. But now, that belief was cracking, just like the ancient marble beneath their feet. Some whispered that Rome's strength had never truly been in its grand structures. It had been in the minds of its people, the architects of thought, the poets, the dreamers. But in the wake of the sack, even those voices seemed to quiet, and the cracks in Rome's identity deepened. Was the city still the heart of the world? Or had it become just another city, forgotten, abandoned? The Senate, now divided and weak, could not agree on how to move forward. Many had fled. Some believed the empire could never recover, that its fate was sealed. Others insisted Rome could yet be saved. But how? Could there be any hope after the sack? Could they rebuild what was lost? Breathe deeply, slowly. Imagine the streets of Rome now, once filled with the hustle of a mighty empire, now eerily quiet, save for the occasional whisper of the wind. The once proud marketplaces, where merchants had haggled and soldiers had marched, now lay empty. The gods were silent. And yet, there was still a flicker of something, deep within the heart of the city. A spark of resilience. The people of Rome had not forgotten how to dream. They began to gather, not in the grand forums or in the palaces, but in the quiet corners of the city, in the shadows where the ancient stones still held secrets. They began to speak of the old ways, of the ancient ideas that had once made Rome great. Ideas of justice, of strength, of unity. They spoke of a future where the spirit of Rome could be reborn, not through the walls or the statues, but through the hearts of its people. One such dreamer was a young philosopher named Aurelia. She had witnessed the fall of the empire, the defeat of its gods, and the silence of the Senate. But unlike many others who had given in to despair, Aurelia believed that Rome's power had never been in its walls, nor its emperors, nor its armies. It had been in the hearts and minds of those who lived within its boundaries, in their resilience, in their ability to rise from the ashes of failure. And Aurelia had an idea, a vision that had been forming in the quietest moments. in the stillness of the crumbling city. She gathered a small group of like-minded individuals, philosophers, artists, poets, and common citizens who had refused to give up hope. Together, they began to work in secret, creating a new vision for Rome. They weren't trying to rebuild the empire as it had been. No, they were creating something different, something that would endure, a Rome of the mind, a Rome of the spirit. But it wasn't long before word of their efforts spread. The remnants of the Senate heard the whispers. They feared that this new Rome, born from the dreams of its citizens, would undermine their fragile power. And so, they sent their spies, their informants, to watch the dreamers, to silence their voices before they could build something greater than the empire itself. Yet, despite the growing pressure, Aurelia and her followers pressed on. They spoke not of conquering lands, but of conquering the mind. Not of wealth, but of wisdom. They began to teach, to spread their ideas in secret, in small gatherings in hidden corners of the city. The old gods may have turned away from Rome, but in the hearts of its citizens, something new was rising. As the days turned to weeks, the cracks in Rome seemed to widen. The old empire was gone, replaced by something uncertain, something fragile. Yet, in this uncertainty, something beautiful began to emerge. People gathered together in the night, beneath the ruins of their once great city, to share stories, to listen to the ancient philosophies that had once guided them. They spoke of justice. They spoke of peace. They spoke of a Rome that would rise not through blood and conquest, but through ideas and unity. The whispers began to spread. Rome, though broken, had not been defeated. The spirit of the people, the strength of their minds, could still shape the future. But would it be enough? Could these dreamers, these philosophers, rebuild what had been lost? Soft pause. Let that thought linger. If you're still with us, let the quiet rhythm of this story carry you deeper into rest. Allow the gentle flickers of hope, even in the face of ruin, to settle into your mind. The city may have been shattered, but its soul, its essence, could still be rebuilt. It would not be the same Rome, no, but perhaps that was the point. The new Rome would not rise through war, but through wisdom. It would not be the empire of old, but something different, something that could endure long after the last stone of the ancient walls had crumbled into dust. So, as the nights grew colder and the streets quieter, Aurelia and her followers continued their work. They knew the risks. They knew the Senate would never approve of their vision. But they believed that the true strength of Rome was not in its armies or its walls. It was in the minds and hearts of its people. And that belief, that spark, would light the way forward. Soft pause. Allow the warmth of these thoughts to fill your mind. In the next part, we will follow Aurelia's journey as she faces the dangers of her rebellion and the truth of what Rome's future will hold. But for now, let sleep embrace you as Rome's story continues to unfold. In the quiet darkness that followed the fall of Rome, the night seemed longer, heavier. The whispers of those who still believed in the heart of the city grew stronger, yet the shadows of the past could not be shaken. Aurelia and her small circle of dreamers continued their secret work, even as the city lay in ruins around them. They were no longer in hiding. They moved through the streets in plain sight, but in silence. There were no grand speeches, no public declarations, only soft words shared in the safety of dim-lit rooms, where the air was thick with possibility. They spoke in hushed voices of what Rome could become. They spoke of unity, not of soldiers and conquerors, but of citizens bound together by shared dreams, by the hope that they could rebuild not an empire of stone, but a society of thought. Yet, not all were as hopeful as Aurelia. There were those who had not forgotten the past, those who still clung to the idea of Rome as a mighty force, its walls impervious, its legions invincible. They believed that the greatness of Rome was in its power over others. in the conquest of land, in the domination of enemies. These were the voices of the Senate's remnants, the old guard who had once ruled the empire with an iron fist, and they had not yet given up. They moved in shadows too. Behind the closed doors of the Senate, away from the eyes of the citizens, they began to plot. It was a delicate balance. Rome was weakened, but it was not yet defeated. There was still the chance, in their minds, that the old ways could be revived, that the empire could be restored to its former glory. They spoke of alliances with distant kingdoms, of military action against the Goths, of reclaiming lost lands. But this vision, too, had its flaws, for as they spoke of glory and conquest, they failed to see the cracks that had already spread through Rome's soul. They did not understand that the city's future was no longer bound to the past, no longer built upon the bones of the fallen emperors or the dust of old victories. No, Rome had changed, and the change could not be undone. Aurelia knew this. She understood that the city's future lay not in the restoration of the past, but in the creation of something new, a Rome that was built on the strength of its citizens, on their ideas, their creativity, their shared humanity. Yet, even as she moved forward with her vision, danger closed in around her. The Senate's spies were everywhere. They had begun to watch her closely, questioning her every move. Her group of dreamers, once safe in the shadows, was now under constant surveillance. They knew that the old guard would never allow such a revolution to take place. They would stop at nothing to preserve the old order, to return Rome to its former glory, even if it meant crushing the hopes of those who believed in something different. But Aurelia remained undeterred. There were still those who listened, still those who believed that change was possible. Slowly the whispers grew louder. More people joined her cause, drawn by the quiet power of her ideas, by the strength of her conviction. Rome's soul, its spirit, had not been completely shattered. In the dark hours of the night, Aurelia walked through the streets of the city, past the ruins of the old empire, past the broken statues and the empty forums. She did not walk with despair, but with a quiet strength, a quiet hope. For in the shadows of the broken city, a new Rome was rising, slowly but surely. A Rome that would be built not on the bones of the past, but on the dreams of its people. But would the Senate allow it? Would they listen to the whispers of hope, or would they silence them with the power of their old ways? The answers were still unclear. Pause. Let the silence speak. Let your mind wander in the quiet of this uncertainty. Imagine the soft flickers of light in the dark streets, the quiet determination of those who still believed. The city was not dead. No, it was only changing. Aurelia's voice carried on the wind, but she knew the path ahead would not be easy. The Senate would not sit idly by while her vision grew stronger. They would strike back, perhaps in secret, perhaps with open force. But Aurelia would not falter. She knew that the old ways had failed. It was time for a new path. As her footsteps echoed through the ruins, she couldn't help but wonder, would the people follow her? Would they trust in the dream of a Rome built not on conquest, but on peace? Could they rebuild a city where wisdom and unity would lead the way? Her thoughts swirled as she moved through the streets, the ancient stones beneath her feet whispering of the past, while the stars above whispered of the future. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the city, the final question began to form. Would this new Rome be a dream worth fighting for? Pause. A soft breath. Let your mind float, free and calm, as you follow Aurelia through the streets, as she continues her quiet rebellion against the remnants of the old world. In the next part, we will see the clash between the old guard and the dreamers. We will follow Aurelia as she faces the consequences of her vision and the risks she must take to protect the future she believes in. But for now, let the stillness of the night guide you into rest. Soft closing. Whisper tone. Rest now. Rome's story will continue. But for tonight, let sleep carry you onward. In dreams, the city lives on, in whispers, in shadows, and in hope. The dawn of a new era came quietly, like the softest whisper in the breeze. The people of Rome, once so proud, so untouchable, now moved through their days with quiet hesitation. They still lived among the ruins, surrounded by the broken remains of an empire, yet something stirred in their hearts, a faint hope, but a hope nonetheless. Aurelia's vision had planted a seed in the soil of Rome, and though it was fragile, it had begun to sprout. She walked the streets, past the broken columns and fallen statues, her thoughts quiet but resolute. The city had not fallen entirely. It had been wounded, yes, but it had not yet been silenced. The Senate, in its haste to restore what had been lost, had become desperate. Their old power had crumbled, and their influence now stretched only as far as the shadows they cast. They had no answers to the new world that was slowly taking shape before them. The city they had once ruled so firmly was no longer under their control, and they could feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. Aurelia felt this too. Her dreams were still whispered in the corners of the city, in the hearts of those who had not forgotten what it meant to build something better. But she knew that dreams alone would not be enough. She needed more than just hope. She needed action. And so, she gathered her closest allies. In secret, they met in the catacombs beneath the city, the cool air heavy with anticipation. Their voices were low, their plans daring. They would confront the Senate. They would take back Rome, not through bloodshed, but through unity. They would show the Senate that Rome's future lay not in the hands of the few, but in the hearts of the many. But there were dangers. The Senate's spies were everywhere. And even if they managed to unite the people, there was no guarantee the Senate would listen. They were powerful, and their fear of change was strong. Aurelia's heart fluttered with uncertainty, but she remained focused. The time had come. Her footsteps echoed in the dark passageways as she made her way to the center of the city, where the heart of the Senate beat still. She could feel the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders. The ruins, the broken statues, the faded glories of Rome. All of it was a testament to what had been, but not to what could be. The Senate, once a symbol of power, now stood as a shadow of its former self. Their robes were threadbare, their voices weak. They had not won the respect of the people. They had only controlled them. And now, with the city divided, their control was slipping away. Aurelia stood at the foot of the Senate House, gazing up at the towering columns. The city around her was still, its breath held in anticipation. She knew the challenge before her was immense, but she could no longer turn back. The people were waiting for a leader. They were waiting for hope. And she was ready. But as she entered the Senate Hall, she was greeted not with open arms, but with suspicion. The senators, once proud, now sat like vultures circling a dying carcass. Their faces were hardened, their eyes cold. They did not recognize the city that had risen in the hearts of the people. "You speak of unity," one senator sneered. "But unity cannot heal what is broken. Rome is dead. It is no longer the center of the world. We must face the truth." Aurelia stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "Rome is not dead," she said softly, "but it must change. It is no longer enough to rule through power and fear. We must lead through wisdom and love." The words hung in the air, fragile but firm. And for a moment, the senators were silent. They were not prepared for this. They had expected rebellion, rage, a call to arms. But what they heard was a vision that threatened to undo everything they had built. "You are a fool," the same senator spat. "You speak of love, but love will not rebuild Rome. We need strength. We need power. Aurelia's heart quickened, but her voice remained calm. Strength without wisdom is nothing. Power without compassion is empty. The silence grew heavier. Outside, the people had gathered. They stood in the streets, their faces upturned, watching the Senate House with a mixture of fear and hope. They were waiting for a sign, for the world to change, for the dream of a new Rome to be born. But as the senators' voices grew louder, as the debate turned into a shouting match, the walls of the Senate House seemed to close in around Aurelia. The realization dawned upon her. The Senate would not listen. Not today. Perhaps not ever. Yet she could not give up. Not now. With one final breath, Aurelia turned and left the Senate, her heart heavy but resolute. The people were waiting. They needed her, and she would not let them down. As she stepped into the sunlight, the noise of the city seemed to fade away. In that moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Aurelia stood alone, her thoughts swirling like the wind. The Senate had rejected her vision. The city was still divided. But she knew this. The dream of a new Rome could not be silenced. Her steps were slow, but each one was filled with purpose. She would return to the people. She would remind them of the dream, and together they would rise. But the Senate would not stop. They would fight back. They would use every weapon at their disposal to retain their control. And Aurelia would have to face them, not in the halls of power, but in the streets. In the shadows of the broken city, a new battle was beginning. Pause. Let your mind float in this uncertainty. If you've made it this far, you're on the edge of a new chapter in this story. The final chapter is near. Soft closing. Whisper tone. Sleep now. Let the whispers of Rome's fate lull you into rest. Tomorrow, the city will still be here, waiting for the dreams of those who dare to hope. After the dust had settled, after the weeping had stopped, Rome entered a season of quiet, a strange quiet, not fearful, but sacred, like the hush after a storm, when the earth is damp and the air is filled with the scent of something new. The people began to walk again through the streets, not in parades, not in riots, but slowly, softly, like children learning to walk for the first time. The city was learning how to live again. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift down, like old leaves on a river. Rome was no longer the Rome of emperors, no longer the city of gods carved in stone. But something unexpected grew in that emptiness. Humility, and with it, hope. They say that Aurelia, the quiet voice of the people, had once dreamed of planting orchards in the ruins. Where the Senate had once bickered, she imagined fig trees. Where soldiers once shouted, she saw children painting with crushed berries. And in time, others began to see it too. They cleared the broken columns, swept the courtyards, rebuilt not with gold, but with clay and care. Temples became schools, bathhouses became meeting halls. Statues were cleaned, not for worship, but for remembrance. Call to action, soft and personal. If your mind still wanders gently through these sleeping streets, consider following history for sleep. Each story is a thread in the fabric of time, waiting to wrap you in warmth. Outside the city, the world changed. Word of Rome's fall had spread like wind through the trees. In Gaul, in Britannia, in the eastern deserts of Palestine, people asked the same question. If Rome can fall, what will rise in its place? Some kings clung tighter to power. Others opened their gates to monks, artists, scholars. A strange paradox bloomed. Where violence had reigned, now wisdom began to take root. Not everywhere, not perfectly, but enough to spark something fragile and beautiful. In the old Roman roads, once used to march armies, pilgrims now walked, barefoot, praying, carrying books. They spoke of peace, of brotherhood, of light, and some said this was the true beginning, not of an empire, but of a soul. Breathe deeply. You're doing well. The Bishop of Rome, once a minor figure in the imperial court, began to speak with a new voice, one of healing. He walked among the ruins, a man in simple robes, offering not law, but comfort, not taxes, but blessings. He reminded the people that Rome had not fallen. It had shed a skin. It had let go of what was no longer needed. And in its place, something softer remained. Soft interlude. Allow a pause here. In the shadow of the Colosseum, where crowds had once cheered for blood, musicians began to gather at dusk. They played flutes made of olive wood, sang hymns to a sky no longer filled with smoke. There was no audience, only the stars, and the sound of water flowing once more in old fountains. Children danced in the dust, old men wept quietly, women sowed seeds in the cracks of the forum, and slowly, dream by dream, Rome was reborn, but not in glory, not in conquest, not in power. It was reborn in rest, in reflection, in kindness. Dreamy CTA, delicate and slow. If these echoes soothe you, if the rhythm of history has lulled your breath, follow history for sleep. Tomorrow night, another door will open, and we'll walk through it together. Some years later, a traveler arrived in the city. He came from Alexandria, with sand still clinging to his cloak. He carried scrolls, poetry, astronomy, philosophy. He expected ruins, expected fear. But what he found was music. He followed the sounds until he reached a garden once patrolled by soldiers. There, a group sat in a circle, reading from an old text, half Greek, half Latin. They welcomed him, offered wine, laughed easily. He stayed. And when he returned home, he did not write of Rome's fall. He wrote, "Rome has become a city of gentle ghosts, of memory and mist, of stories told softly beneath fig trees. It has lost its sword and found its soul." And what of the Visigoths? After Alaric's death, they drifted, never quite at home, never quite rooted. Some settled in Gaul, some in Spain. They became farmers, soldiers, citizens. They married into Roman families, wrote Latin laws, prayed in Roman churches, and one day, no one could tell anymore where the barbarian ended, and the Roman began. History doesn't end. It softens. It changes its name, like a river reshaping its path, or a dream you half remember. So now, you know the truth. Rome did not die that night. It paused. It listened. And it chose to become something quieter. Not eternal, but enduring. Final soft CTA. Poetic whisper. When sleep pulls you under, when your thoughts drift into fog, remember this. Even the greatest empires must rest. And in rest, they find new meaning. You are safe. You are held. And Rome is dreaming beside you. Sleep now. Tomorrow we begin again. Another time, another place, another whisper in the dark. Not all of Rome died in the West. As ashes cooled in the ruins of Italy, something shimmered in the East. A second heart, still beating. They called it Nova Roma, the new Rome. But history would call it something else. Constantinople. Let your body melt into your bed. Let your thoughts drift across the sea. Past the islands. Past the waves. To the city of golden domes. Pause. Soft sacred tone. Built by Constantine. Bathed in prophecy. Protected by saints and sea walls. Constantinople rose like a dream. And unlike the Rome of old, this city did not worship Jupiter. It wore the cross. Here, emperors still ruled, senators still debated, legions still marched. but their banners now bore angels, not eagles, and their swords defended relics, not republics. It was Rome, through a mirror, holy, cautious, enduring, and for a time, untouchable. CTA, gentle invitation. If your mind still wanders the marble roads of history, stay with us. Follow history for sleep, and each night will light a new lantern along the path through time. Within Constantinople's walls, libraries bloomed. They guarded Aristotle, translated Plato, copied Virgil by hand, page by page, year by year. Monks whispered Latin into Greek, and then Greek into Arabic, and then Arabic back again. Knowledge did not die. It migrated. Let that comfort you now. Even in ruin, truth survives, like a seed in winter. The Hagia Sophia rose, not as a palace, but as a poem in stone. Its dome floated like the sky itself, held not by pillars, but by faith. Light poured through it, like water through glass. People called it the eighth wonder of the world. Others called it heaven, trapped on earth. And when the choir sang at dawn, the city stopped to listen. Even the waves of the Bosphorus grew still. Let the imagined sound wash over you, then dissolve into quiet. But not all was peace. Beyond the walls, others watched. Hungry kings, rising caliphs, wandering warriors. They saw the gold, heard the bells, and dreamed of taking the new Rome for themselves. But Constantinople endured. For 1,000 years it stood, through siege and storm, through earthquake and fire, through betrayal and plague. Because while the West burned, the East remembered. They remembered Caesar, remembered the Senate, remembered what it meant to wear the laurel crown and the crown of thorns. CTA, soft and spiritual. Let your heart rest in that thought. That memory itself can be a fortress. Follow history for sleep. Here we remember gently, we dream deeply, and we never walk alone. And yet, nothing truly eternal is. Not even Constantinople. By the 1400s, the cracks had returned, not from within, but from the Ottoman Empire. A new power, a new fire. They circled like wolves. They built cannons taller than men. They dragged ships across land. They prayed to another god. And the Byzantines, tired and few, held onto the walls. But the world had changed. Allies failed to arrive. Supplies dwindled. Hope thinned. And in 1453, under a sky thick with crows, the final wall fell, and with it, Rome ended. Not with fire, not with flood, but with silence. Silence in the Hagia Sophia, silence in the libraries, silence where emperors once stood. The last emperor, Constantine V, was never found. Some say he died sword in hand. Others say he turned to marble and waits beneath the city to rise again. Legends are all that remain, but legends are enough. Pause. For mystery to settle for Rome, it seems, never really dies. It only sleeps. In the flag of a nation, in the design of a courthouse, in the idea of a republic. You feel it when you vote, when you debate, when you walk beneath arches. Rome whispers still, not as an empire, but as a ghost, guiding our hands. CTA, gentle and eternal. If these ghosts of history hold your heart, if they calm your mind like lullabies from stone, follow history for sleep. We're not done dreaming, not even close. And neither is Rome. Rome had fallen, twice, once in the west and once in the east. Its statues toppled, its palaces plundered, its emperors vanished. And yet, Rome still moved, not on marble legs, but in minds. Let yourself soften, let your limbs become heavy, let the centuries carry you. We are not done with Rome. Rome is not done with us. Pause, gentle as turning pages. Far from the ruins, in monasteries tucked into mountains, men in robes dipped their quills and saved the past. They copied everything: Cicero, Seneca, Ovid, Livy, word by word, day by day, by candlelight. They wrote not to conquer, but to remember, because memory is a kind of victory. And from those pages, a new Rome would begin to stir, not one of legions, but of letters, not built of stone, but of thought. CTA, calm and thoughtful. If you feel history breathing beside you tonight, stay with us. Follow history for sleep, and each night we'll journey further, into the forgotten corners, where Rome still lives. Centuries passed. The world grew colder, wilder, more fractured. Kings rose and fell. Plagues swept the land. Languages shifted, but the texts remained. And then, something bloomed. In the streets of Florence, in the minds of men like Petrarch, in whispers called the Renaissance. It means rebirth. And what was reborn was Rome. Let the breath deepen, then rise again with soft wonder. Artists began to paint like Romans, sculpt like Romans, write like Romans. Architects built domes that echoed the Pantheon. Philosophers debated as if in the Forum. Politicians read the Republic and dreamed new republics of their own. The ghost of Caesar lingered behind every law. The ghost of Cicero whispered in every courtroom, even in America. When new founders wrote their own destiny, they reached for Roman words: Senate, Capitol, liberty. They studied Roman failures, feared Roman pride, and hoped to build what Rome could not: a republic that might endure, a Rome without emperors, a Rome of the people. Even now, as you lie still, your world hums with Roman echoes. Let history for sleep be your guide through the ruins beneath your feet and the dreams behind your laws. And still, Rome lingers. It lingers in the languages we speak, in Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. Each one, a daughter of Latin. Each one, a note in Rome's final song. Even English carries her bones. In every word like justice, military, structure, empire, you speak Rome without knowing. You carry it in your voice. Pause. Let that thought settle like mist. So maybe Rome never died. Maybe empires don't end. They transform, like rivers splitting into branches, like embers lighting new fires. Rome became a mosaic, a memory etched into the world, hidden in flags, in roads, in dreams. Not one city, not one people, but a question. Can greatness last without pride? Can order survive without cruelty? Can we learn without falling? The Romans could not answer, but maybe we still can. And so, tonight, you rest not at the end of the story, but somewhere in the middle. Because Rome's tale is not about how it fell, but how it refuses to disappear. Even in your sleep, it waits. In every courthouse, in every university, in every story that believes in law, honor, and legacy. Even this one. Even now. CTA, final breath before the closing rise. Let this journey stay with you, like a dream you almost remember. If your heart is still wandering ancient roads, follow history for sleep. We'll walk further still, into new empires, new ruins, and new awakenings. We are never truly lost in time. Only paused, only resting. Tonight, let the stones speak one last time. Rome was never perfect, never truly just. It failed, again and again, but it tried, it reached, it imagined. And in that, we find our mirror. So sleep now, and if you dream of togas, or temples, or triumphs, know that you are not alone. Somewhere, in a library of stars, Rome is dreaming too, and it waits for you there. Close your eyes once more. Breathe in and let go. The dust of Rome still hangs in the air, but beneath that dust, a new voice begins to rise. Not the voice of Caesar, not the voice of Jupiter, but something softer, something sacred. Pause, gentle and reverent. While Rome burned, the cross stood tall, not in the forum, not in the palace, but in small homes, in candlelit crypts, in whispered prayers passed from one trembling hand to another. Christianity was not born in Rome, but it was Rome that gave it form, and Rome that tried, for centuries, to silence it. The emperors feared it, feared its power, feared its softness, because this faith did not worship emperors. It worshipped mercy. It did not kneel to gold, but to love. And love, in the end, outlived the legions. CTA, quiet and soul-soothing. If your heart still wanders the ruins, follow history for sleep. Here, we drift not only through empires, but through the ideas that survived them, even faith. At first, the Christians were hunted, fed to lions, burned as torches, mocked in arenas, but they endured, because hope is stronger than fear. They sang in chains, prayed in tombs, and forgave their killers. Rome could not understand them, because Rome did not understand weakness, or surrender, or grace. But time changes all things, even empires. Pause. Reflectively. By the time Alaric entered the city, Rome was already Christian. Emperors bowed to bishops, senators built churches. And the old gods were quiet. Jupiter no longer ruled the skies. Minerva no longer guarded wisdom. They faded like myths, like breath on glass. And in their place, a carpenter's son, a man who preached peace, who wept, who forgave, who died, and whose story changed the world. After the sack, as the streets cleared and the fires cooled, the people did not rebuild temples. They rebuilt faith. In every broken column, they saw a cross. In every shattered statue, a reminder of humility. In every silence, a prayer. They believed Rome had fallen, so something greater could rise. Not an empire, but a kingdom. One not of swords, but of souls. The night is quiet now, but memory still walks its halls. Rome has fallen, but her echoes remain. And in those echoes, we find not just history, but something more. A mirror, a lesson, a gentle reminder that nothing truly ends. Breathe in, slowly, let go. After the sack, after the smoke, after the silence, Europe awoke to a new morning. But it was not the morning of empire. It was the morning of uncertainty. The roads were broken, the aqueducts dry, the statues cracked. But the people remained. Farmers still sowed their seeds. Children still laughed in alleyways. Fires still burned in humble hearths. Life always finds a way. CTA, soft and final. If this journey brought you peace, follow history for sleep. More stories await. But tonight, let this one be enough. The emperors were gone. The Senate. A memory. But new voices rose. Not in Latin. Not in marble halls. But in forests. In monasteries. In the hearts of wandering tribes. The Franks. The Saxons. The Lombards. They did not see themselves as Romans. But Rome lived in their laws. In their dreams. In their myths. Because once Rome touches you, you carry it forever. The world had entered a new age. Some would call it dark. But darkness is not always to be feared. It is in darkness that seeds grow, that stars are seen, that silence speaks. And in this silence, a new Europe began to breathe. One of kings and castles, of knights and cathedrals, of legends, and learning. It would be slower, rougher, but not empty. Because even without its crown, Rome had planted too deep. Pause, thoughtful and still. Even the conquerors wanted to be Roman, Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperors. They wore the title like a relic, not because it gave them power, but because it gave them meaning. Rome became a symbol, a compass, a ghost that whispered, "This is what was possible, and perhaps what could be again." In time, the Renaissance would come, and with it, the rebirth of beauty, the return of philosophy, of sculpture, of science. And what did they reach for first? Rome, its columns, its poets, its vision. Even after 1,000 years, Rome still guided the hand. From Michelangelo's brush to Machiavelli's pen, Rome lived on. CTA, final and peaceful. If you've stayed with us this far, thank you. You've walked through ashes and altars, across centuries and sorrow. Let history for sleep be your home each night. There's always a new story waiting, always another echo. But tonight, the story ends, not with fire, not with glory, but with a whisper. Rome was never just a place. It was an idea, an ambition, a contradiction. It conquered, it created, it betrayed, it inspired. And like all great things, it broke. But in breaking, it became something new, not weaker, just different, human. Pause. Let silence stretch. So if you find yourself in ruins, remember Rome. If you feel lost, remember Alaric. If you doubt the future, remember that even fallen empires can plant seeds for centuries to come. And even the darkest nights lead to dawn. Closing breath, slow and calm. Now sleep. Let go of time, of names, of battles. Let the ghosts of Rome rest. They have told their story, and you have listened. Thank you, and good night.